Hey, apparently we're live. Hey, welcome. I'm Jack Gately. Let's take a look at today's headlines. Share my screen with you, bring this up, and let's get started. There we go. Perfect. Excellent. So, if you haven't seen this story here from Virginia, a journalist calls Child Protective Services on a Virginia State Senate candidate because she was telling her daughter about Columbus Day. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it is like blowing up on the internet. So I really thought I should spend it just a moment as we start today's show with this story. So David Levitt apparently has 300,000 followers on Twitter. And 2 days ago, he was offended that this state Senate candidate, I think her name is Tina Ramirez, I teach my daughter the real American history. I refuse to join the radical left's campaign to erase history. And David Levitt, the so-called journalist, suggested that his followers called the child abuse hotline, that they're experiencing high call volumes with 14 callers ahead of me. It doesn't surprise me that a so-called journalist would do this, but it's really amazing that they would publicize it. Tina Ramirez was originally criticizing the PayPal story from about a week ago, where PayPal came out with new terms of service that said if they didn't like what you said, they would deduct $2,500 from your account. And it just went from there. It was just insane. The other day here in beautiful Massachusetts, we had a school nurse in Ipswich report to the town administrator that the police department put a poem up on their Facebook page on Columbus Day about Columbus. So there's nothing wrong with putting a poem on your Facebook page about Columbus. Columbus Day is an official holiday. And there's nothing wrong about mentioning Columbus or celebrating Columbus in any way, shape, or form. I celebrate Columbus Day mostly for understanding the spirit of discovery, even though he was wrong and he thought the globe was much smaller, all that stuff. It took guts to sail off to the end of the earth to find what you didn't know. And I think that's a tremendous thing to value. Now, if you want to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, go right ahead. And I'm not going to poo-poo that. If that's your thing, go do that. And you shouldn't bleep on someone else's holiday. So, hey, good for you, Tina Ramirez, for standing up for yourself and for your kid. If you want to teach Columbus Day to your kid, go right ahead. And bleep you, David Levitt, journalist, for trying to call out her and having apparently hundreds of people, or allegedly hundreds of people, call Child Protective Services. Don't you think Child Protective Services in Virginia has other things to do that are much more important than playing politics, like actually saving kids' lives? You remember Tulsi Gabbard, right? Yesterday, she quit the Democratic Party, and today she's in beautiful New Hampshire endorsing Don Bolduc, who is running for U.S. Senate against Maggie Hassan, the incumbent. So she hasn't really said if she'll become a Republican, but like the next day, she's in New Hampshire endorsing and campaigning with Don Bolduc, who, if you live in New Hampshire, is your candidate for U.S. Senate rather than Maggie Hassan. So good for Tulsi. She's kept it going. This seems to be a really well thought out and well planned strategy. Launching the podcast, I think she did the other day. Big news, leaving the party, and now off to New Hampshire. Hopefully, she'll be with. She's very hot right now, very hot political commodity, because she's moved over. And you look for these types of people that have moved over from one party to another. There's a lot of people moving, whether it's Hispanic American, all sorts of people moving, African American moving over to the Republican Party. It's becoming a trend in this election. And so good for Tulsi for being a big part of that. Uh, Talking about elections, let's go to Colorado. A beautiful state. I've had the fortune to visit Colorado the last 3 years. I hadn't been to Colorado except to like have a layover at the airport for an hour or two. Hadn't been to Colorado before that since 1984. But the last 3 years I've been to Colorado. It is beautiful. Colorado Secretary of State office accidentally sent 30,000 voter registration notices to non-citizens. Oh, what could go wrong, right? If you're from Massachusetts, this should sound vaguely familiar to you because earlier this year, the state legislature passed a law allowing illegal aliens to get driver's licenses here in Massachusetts. That law is on the ballot to be repealed this November. And this is a perfect case study from Colorado as to why you should vote to repeal it. Now, the wording on that question is pretty tricky. So you want to double check whether you should vote yes or no. I can't remember off the top of my head. But definitely check the wording. All right. So Democratic Secretary of State Gina Griswold said it's unaware that any non-citizens who received the postcards and ever tried to register, probably because they didn't want to know. They're unaware because they don't want to be aware. And so what happened here and why this is relevant to the driver's license for illegal aliens is because this happened because they were cross-referencing a list of 102,000 people in the Electronic Registration Information Center to a database of Colorado residents issued driver's licenses. So basically they were like scrubbing their lists, and the people got into the hadn't registered to vote bucket because they had driver's licenses. Not that would ever happen in Massachusetts. By the way, when they passed the illegal alien driver license bill here in Massachusetts, there were several amendments, especially in the state Senate, that would have designed the license in a different way, have it like a different color, or actually have language on their words, not eligible to vote, or things like that, that would distinguish the driver's license from that of an American citizen, in the very same way that like the junior operating license is, what do they call that? A vertical, where the adult driver's license is horizontal. They had something on there, several amendments that would allow it to be distinguished between a regular driver's license and that of someone who doesn't live in the does not have legal status, we'll say. That they're here illegally. But all of those were shot down. So your American citizen, U.S. resident, Massachusetts citizen driver's license is going to look the same visually as the license for an illegal alien. Yeah, what could go wrong? All right, so talking about illegal aliens, Mayorkas alerted that no Haitian migrants were whipped hours before White House press conference. So this goes back to that story last year where the folks on the left did absolutely everything they could to change the narrative relative to illegal migration. This especially when the migrants were camping under the International Bridge in Del Rio, a place that I went to when I was on my trip to Texas just earlier this year. Went right to that bridge, and you can't really get down there because they got a big fence, but as close as you could get, like a quarter mile. And let's just read this headline here. Mayorkas was told that the photographer who captured a clash between Border Patrol agents and Haitian migrants in Del Rio said that the incident was being misconstrued hours before Mayorkas joined a White House press conference where he didn't challenge the false narrative. Now, you could argue that even though he was sent the email, maybe he didn't get to read it in the 2 or 3 hours before the White House press conference. But he has certainly had the opportunity to read it now. It's been over a year, I believe. Yeah, September 2021. The Heritage Foundation obtained the email, shines a light on internal deliberations surrounding the Del Rio controversy, where Democrats, including the White House, President Biden, said that migrants were whipped or strapped by Border Patrol agents. Part of this story goes from the fact that nobody in Washington has ever probably ridden a horse, so they don't know what they're talking about. Not that I'm an expert, but I've been on a horse a couple of times. And probably none of them have ever ridden a horse. But that doesn't, even if they had, they don't care about the facts. Even if Mayorkas hadn't read this email before he went to the press conference, he's had plenty of time to read it since then and correct the record. But no, it depends upon the Heritage Foundation to go file a FOIA request and get a copy of this email. President Biden at the time said to treat people like they did, horses barely running over people, people being trampled, it's outrageous. Making a whipping action with his hand. I promise you those people will pay, meaning the Border Patrol agents. So, I mean, the investigation is biased right out of there will be consequences. There's biased right out of the gate. Marcia Espinoza, Assistant Secretary of DHS for Public Affairs, emailed Mayorkas and CC'd other DHS leadership, alerting them to the news article that showed the photographer who took the images did not see any whipping. In the email, Espinoza highlighted the comments from the photographer where he directly said he did not see any whipping. In other words, she's like, hey, yo, Mayorkas, what you just said, what you're going to say and what you have said doesn't add up. 2.5 hours after receiving the email, Mayorkas joined the White House press conference with Cinnamon Commie, Jen Psaki, where he continued to push the narrative. Quote, Mayorkas said, our nation saw horrifying images that do not reflect who we are. We know that those images painfully conjure up the worst elements, blah, 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 blah. All of that was a lie. None of the migrants were whipped. Border Patrol agents were simply controlling their horses. If you had ever ridden a horse, you would have known that. Meanwhile, in El Paso is expecting 60,000 migrants in the month of October. Now, here in beautiful Plymouth, we have a population of about 63,000. So that's almost the entire population of Plymouth, America's hometown, arriving on the doorstep of El Paso. And it's about 9%. El Paso's got about 680,000 people, and about 8 or 9% of the overall El Paso population in 1 month. In 1 month. You know, for you Plymouth people here, imagine if 5,500 illegal immigrants showed up on our doorstep in 1 month. You know, what would happen? What would happen here? Well, we'd probably all send them to a military base or something like that, right? Yeah, of course we would. That's what Miles State stand. But that's where we'd send them, of course, because we don't. Yeah. By the way, Plymouth here, America's hometown. I don't think there's any resolution in town. I haven't seen any signs around that indicate it's a sanctuary city. So hopefully they'll just send them to Cambridge or something like that. By the way, El Paso is planning to send them to sanctuary jurisdictions. New York, Chicago. They've already been doing that. And this article details with the debate about how El Paso is going to handle this situation, because basically they're going to have to front the money in hopes that the feds will reimburse them later for all these buses that are going to be moving from El Paso to urban centers across the country, Chicago, and elsewhere, basically outside of Texas. I did not go to El Paso. I at the time in August, all the action was happening in Eagle Pass, where I did go, but and I could have went to El Paso, but for whatever reason, I didn't go there. So they're talking here in this article about, hey, how is El Paso going to get paid for this, right? That's a really good question. Meanwhile, across the river from El Paso, Juarez police seize a cache of high-powered guns, 11 weapons, which is actually really not much. There were some high-powered weapons here. a couple of AR and AK-47 rifles, and yeah, those are powerful things. But how do I want to say this? A drop in the bucket for what we're facing here. But if you don't are aware, Juarez is directly across from El Paso. So the cartel, this will not put a dent in the cartel at all. The cartels are functionally in charge of our border. You know, I was talking with somebody the other day, somebody from the other side of the political fence, so to speak, and they insisted that our border was not open. Okay, sure. By the way, Mexico, interesting twist, is something I didn't know until today. Mexico has one gun factory, and most of the guns in Mexico come from the United States. All right, Pfizer execs admit under oath we never tested the COVID vaccine against transmission. What? So in the European Parliament the other day, the European Parliament, the guy from the Netherlands, Roos, I think his name, was questioning a Pfizer official, and she admitted that they were working at the speed of science, and they never tested whether or not if you took the vaccine, could you spread it? I mean, isn't that like the whole definition of a vaccine, so that you don't spread it? I don't know. You know, just spitball in here. If you get the vaccine, you shouldn't be able to get the virus, and you shouldn't be able to spread the virus. I guess it's supposed to be two things, right? Technically two things. But apparently they never tested for the second thing, which is could you spread it? And remember when we all started off and breakthrough cases were, oh, breakthrough cases, that's just a small percentage. I remember when breakthrough cases passed 50% of the total cases, and the Boston Globe stopped reporting the breakthrough case percentage. You know, so many of these things, so many of these outrageous things that we're lied to about, they're simply just forgotten. And there's going to be a huge effort right now by everyone. We saw that by Dr. Birx over the summertime, saying, you know, oh, well, we didn't say that. That's not exactly what we said. Yeah, okay, sure. Where's the smoking gun here in this article? I think I emailed it down. Here we go. So Pfizer CEO says in late 2020 that he's not certain his firm tested for the transmittability, lack of a better word, of the COVID-19 virus to other people. I think this is something that needs to be examined, CEO Burla said. We are not certain about that right now, told NBC News in 2020. In 2020, Dr. Birx said that we knew early on in January 21 and late December 22 that reinfection was occurring after natural infection. We might have known it, but we didn't want to tell anybody. In May of 2021, COVID, according to Dr. Fauci, was a dead end in vaccinated people. And in July of 2021, President Biden said, you're not going to get COVID if you have these vaccines. But over the summer, Fauci actually retracted his statement in the summer of 21 and said that vaccinated people are capable of transmitting the virus. But that didn't stop a lot of people in private sector and in our government from losing their jobs. This year, so this would have been like 7 or 8 months after Fauci made that admission, in April of this year, at least a dozen state troopers lost their job here in Massachusetts because they wouldn't get the vaccine, even though the government had already said, what, 8 months ago before this, that it doesn't stop transmission. It's safe and effective. Sure it is. Okay, so We're just going to leave that one right there. Let's move on to our next and final story in today's uh, edition of headlines. Local media outlet deletes story about volleyball team opposing biological male changing in locker room amid controversy. So up in Vermont a couple of weeks ago, I can't remember how many, there was this amazing story that came out from school district in Vermont that said that, how do I want to say this before I get banned by every Facebook in the world? In Randolph, Vermont, a biological male who identified as a female was allowed to change in the girls' bathroom. And some of the girls on the girls' volleyball team took exception to this. Now, they had to change in the singular stall. And in order to change one at a time, that took like 30 minutes. And they said, why can't the boy who identifies as a girl who's on the girls' volleyball team change in the stall? That'd only take a minute or two, and it would be a lot more efficient, and it wouldn't make us feel uncomfortable. So WKAX TV, they are not going to win the Edward R. Murrow Award for journalism. They have now taken down that story. They have deleted that story. Not because they're admitting that it was false. No. If they wanted to issue a correction, they could have. Instead, they just deleted it. Like it says here, here's their webpage. 404 page not found. We couldn't find the page that, this is where the story used to live on their website. They just simply deleted it. No retraction, no correction, just memory hold it. Why? Was it wrong? Well, no, but instead, we didn't announce it then for fear that they might inflame the situation. In other words, they didn't announce that they took down the story because they didn't want to inflame the situation. Listen, when you're a journalist, when you sit down, there's an old phrase, I can't remember who said, when you sit down at the keyboard, you have no friends. You just write the truth. Whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Other people got to be responsible for their actions. You've got to print the truth. That's all that matters. But WCAX is now, quote, we are now working with the LGBTQ advocates on a message to the community acknowledging the harm that was caused. In other words, they've caved. They have totally, absolutely, positively caved to the alphabet mafia, and you can never believe anything else that's ever published by WCAX. You just can't do it. I mean, that's just, when you're willing to completely erase a story that is not proven to be an factual story, but just a story that makes people uncomfortable. It's a truthful story, but some people don't like it. When you're willing to delete that story, you have deleted your journalism card. And you're no longer a journalist, you're an activist. By the way, lastly, I'll just mention here, in that same town, the FBI is now investigating a hate speech attack on the school that banned girls from their own locker room. Because apparently someone has attacked the school website with really ugly, discriminatory speech and somehow disabled the school website. That, if you're a fair-minded person, you should say, you know what, that too is also wrong. And you cannot be attacking websites, sending threats or anything like that. If you have an opposition, then go on Facebook or wherever you go to the public square, hold a sign, do whatever you do. But don't be launching attacks against school websites or anything like that. So whoever did this, I might agree with them that about the central issue, but you can't be attacking websites or anything like that. That is also wrong. There's so many people out there that are so blind to one side or another that they've lost all objectivity, that they excuse bad behavior on their side of the aisle as somehow justified. And by doing so, we lose our sense of civic responsibility, our civic soul. You've got to be able to say, hey, you're right about the central issue, but you're wrong about the way you went about it. You know, that's very, very important. Just done sharing my screen here with this new famous or cool technology. I'm glad it's worked out. I'm John F. Gately. You can call me Jack, broadcasting to you from Plymouth, America's hometown in Massachusetts, behind enemy lines. Have a great day. Bye-bye.